How to prepare for claimant pension exams, ankle, knees, and hips edition. So you've got a claimant pension exam coming up for your ankles, your knees, or your hips. This might be a two-part claimant pension exam where they're looking at just the severity, or they might also be looking at whether or not there's a nexus to your service. Let's talk about the DBQ portion, or the severity of the injury. They're going to be fundamentally looking at a couple different things. First is range of motion. And for range of motion, they should use something called a goniometer in determining how far your knee, ankle, hip moves before either it starts hurting or it stops moving altogether. And they'll want to see, is it the normal range of motion or is the range of motion abnormal? Is it inhibited by pain? Is it also inhibited by repeated use? They'll also try to come up with an estimate of how does it perform under flare-ups, right? So if some days are better for your knees than others, and you tell that to the claimant pension examiner, they should give an estimate as to how bad it gets on its worst days, as to how far it can move. Now with knees in particular, they're also going to be looking at whether or not the knee is stable. Do you wear a knee brace? Do you wear an ankle brace, etc., to keep the joints stable? If you wear one of those, wear it to the exam. It's a good idea. This might be a little bit controversial, but I've heard other people advise it and it really makes sense. If you're on a constant diet of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs, what have you, well, just to solve your knee, ankle, or hip pain, you might want to take it easy on those because the examiner is going to want to get a good assessment of what your actual condition is, not what your condition is while medicated. Now, critically, and I cannot emphasize this enough, if you are on medication to keep your blood pressure down or to keep you alive, don't take it. Don't not take it, right? Like, if it's an important medication, keep taking it. But if you've popped a couple ibuprofen before an exam, well, that might not be reflective of the true severity of your knee, hip, or ankle condition. Again, I will say this again, I will stomp my foot and I will bang the table. If you take medications for your heart or for your diabetes or whatever it is that you need to stay alive, keep doing that. Pain is so severe that you need to take your ibuprofen, take your ibuprofen. Don't stop taking medications just for that. But it's important to get a sense for how bad are your knees, hips, and ankles when you're not taking your ibuprofen or your Motrin or whatever, ibuprofen is Motrin, or your naproxen, whatever your medication is. All the same rules apply as to all the other exams. Tell the truth. Don't exaggerate and don't underestimate your symptoms. Show up on time, don't miss your exam, and document your symptoms beforehand. So there are days where you accidentally missed taking your Motrin, write that down, write down how you felt. Now the second issue is going to be the medical opinion portion of this, as to determine whether or not there's a nexus between your current condition and your service. And for that, they're going to ask, well, when was the onset of your symptoms? And they're going to want to know, well, how long has your knee, hip, or ankle been bothering you? And they may be looking at this to determine whether it's bothered you since the time you were in service or whether it might be secondary to some other condition. Coming up with the right date of onset is important, so that communicating that to the VA. Again, this is where documenting your symptoms and documenting the history and preparing for the exam can really come in handy. How long has your ankle been hurting you? Has it hurt you since you were on that ruck march and twisted it back in 2012? Has your knee been hurting you for the last couple years, but your ankle has been bothering you since your time in service? Again, document your symptoms, document the history, and bring that to the exam, or even upload it to the VA with your claim. This is also a good time to remind you, take notes. If they fail to take any range of motion testing, that's a good note to take, because they're really supposed to be taking range of motion on most of these orthopedic tests, whether they're measuring impact on your knees, impact on your hips, and impact on your ankles. It's also important to tell the VA examiner, the contract VA examiner, yeah, you might be able to move your knee, but past a certain point it hurts. Or you may be able to move your ankle, but past a certain point it hurts. Because we're trying to assess as well, not just whether you can move it, but whether you can move it without pain, because pain begins to become a functional impairment. If you can move your ankle every which direction, but it starts hurting, that's really important to tell the examiner. Likewise with your knee, and likewise with your hip. If your hips pop, if your knees pop, if your ankles pop, again, another thing to tell the examiner, even if it doesn't happen the day of the exam. With that said, that's sort of the breakdown of what's going to happen during your claimant pension exam. They're going to take measurements. They're going to ask you questions about how it impacts your activities of daily living. The best way to prepare for these is to document your symptoms, take notes on it beforehand, either bring it with you to the exam and or submit it directly to the VA with your claim or at any time during the claim stream so that it becomes part of your claims file. Again, this is your evidence and it's important to substantiate, not rely on the VA just to develop all the evidence themselves. I hope that was helpful in preparing for your claim and pension exam for your ankle, knee, or hips. Stay tuned for other videos on this topic and make sure to go back and watch the video I did on the basics of claim and pension exams. Hopefully they will be helpful and hopefully they will arm you with the tools you need to make your case as strong as possible. Till next time, take care.